Babu Gogineni is a human rights activist from Andhra Pradesh. He has appeared on the second season of the Telugu Big Boss show and has contributed a lot to the rational thinkers movement of India by openly speaking up against superstitions and unscientific beliefs. He has challenged plenty of self-proclaimed godmen and exposed them for what they truly are. He has inspired an entire generation of youngsters through his speeches to never believe in anything blindly, but to instead adopt a scientific, rational and questioning approach to all situations in life. So needless to say, this man does deserve a lot of props for what he has done. But now comes the sad part as to how such a person who claims to be rational, becomes so irrational, illogical, unreasonable, unscientific and absurd when confronted with the ideology of veganism. There are plenty of videos of him online where he speaks against veganism. It would be impossible for me to make a response to every single one of them, so I'll only be responding to some of them. So without further ado, let's get straight into the response.
కాకపోతే మేము ఇలా తింటున్నాము మీరు ఇలా తినట్లేదు కాబట్టి ఇది ఒక ఇమ్మోరల్ థింగ్ అనో మొరాలిటీ ఇష్యూస్ వస్తాయనో ఆహారం విషయంలో వి స్టార్టెడ్ దిస్ మార్నింగ్స్ డిస్కషన్ విత్ ది ఐడియా ఆఫ్ టాబూస్ అబౌట్ ఫుడ్. దెర్ ఇస్ నో రీజన్ వై వీ షుడ్ హ్యావ్ టాబూస్ అబౌట్ ఫుడ్ ఎక్సెప్ట్ వెన్ యువర్ డాక్టర్ టెల్స్ యూ ఆర్ వెన్ యూ హ్యావ్ ఎన్ అలర్జీ. Then of course you would do what is the right thing to do. కానీ ఫుడ్లో మొరాలిటీ ఉందని, ఫుడ్లో చాలా కమిట్మెంట్ టు ద వరల్డ్స్ వెల్ఫేర్ ఉందని చెప్పుకునే వాళ్ళు దే హ్యావ్ నాట్ స్టడీడ్ ద సైన్స్ వెల్ ఇనఫ్ అండ్ వారు ఒక ఉన్మాదంతో చేస్తూ ఉన్నారు. నువ్వు రుచి కోసం చేస్తున్నావు, నీ కొవ్వొక్కి చేస్తున్నావు, ఇట్లా మాట్లాడాల్సిన అవసరం అస్సలు లేదు.
The word taboo usually carries a negative connotation to it, and you are using it here to make it seem like we vegans hold irrational beliefs that we want to force upon others. Our beliefs are neither irrational nor do we impose. In other words, just like many others have responded to before, you intentionally misrepresent us vegans. Also, we need to get the definition of the word vegan right, as many people speak against veganism without even knowing what it actually means. Although veganism does involve food and the products you see on the supermarket shelves are labeled as vegan, veganism is actually not a diet. It is a social justice movement for animals. It is a movement that fights and speaks up for the rights of non-human animals found in human society. You cannot consult your doctor as to whether you're against forcefully impregnating, torturing, enslaving and murdering animals. That is a conversation you need to have with your conscience. You say that there shouldn't be any morality when it comes to food and therefore conveniently avoid the ethical questions that veganism puts forth. That is the equivalent of saying that we should not talk about ethics when it comes to work while employing child laborers, as it's just business. As another example to make you understand this better, let's talk about snuff films. For those of you who don't know, a snuff film is basically a live recording of somebody being brutally murdered and then that recording being sold on tape later. Now imagine if someone is actually campaigning against snuff films, but the opposing party is saying, now, there is no taboo or morality when it comes to entertainment. In all of the above examples, the victims are ignored, and the object or the system they have been commodified into is given preference instead. From a scientific and biological standpoint, of course animals can be classified under food. Even a fellow human can be classified under food. There have been times in human civilizations where humans sacrifice, kill and eat each other. If people now decided to copy Mayan civilization and decided to start killing fellow humans and eating their meat, would you condemn that? Or would you stick to your adage of, there is no reason why we should have taboos about food? Stop misrepresenting us vegans and start talking about the animals and what they have to go through before they are turned into food if you truly are a rationalist.
Because if you are vegan, then you will not be drinking milk or eating any milk products. And you will not be making use of them in your regular life either, even when you are not consuming them. So you would not even be allowed by the principles of veganism to use milk products even during your puja. అంటే నెయ్యి, పాలాభిషేకం ఇవి కూడా చేయటానికి వీలుండదు. ఐ థింక్ మీరు అంటున్నది ఇండియన్ స్పిరిచువల్ పీపుల్ అంటే వారు వెజిటేరియనిజం గురించి మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. దట్ ఈస్ ఫైన్ అండి. People have their personal choices, we should respect them.
This statement from Babu Gogineni really surprises me. He claims to be a man who stands against superstition and blind faith. He fought against fake babas who say things like invite me to your house and pay me money to do a puja and all your problems will disappear. If a Baba exploiting innocent people for his benefit is wrong, then why won't he also condemn people who exploit animals for their faith also as wrong? Be it doing a puja using ghee, or doing milk abhishekam, or sacrificing a goat during Bakrid, all of those are fundamentally beliefs. There is no evidence that shows that doing any of those things will benefit us in any way. So even if you don't agree with the food aspect of veganism, as you wrongly believe that we need to consume animal products to be healthy, why do you support exploiting an animal for a reason that is completely based on faith and not on science, and also call it as a personal choice? Wearing a red t-shirt or a blue t-shirt? Hey, that's a personal choice. Listening to Carnatic music or Western music? That's a personal choice. Choosing to pay someone to forcibly make an animal pregnant so that you can fatten up her child and chop the child's head off is not a personal choice. Exploiting, enslaving, and murdering someone else is not your personal choice, and no, people will not keep quiet about it. Since when did vegans impose veganism on others? Making a post on social media asking people to reconsider their choices is not imposing. Showing people the reality of where what they eat comes from while companies producing those products lie to them is not imposing. If anything, raising awareness is one of the most peaceful forms of protesting against any injustice. But eating meat, dairy, eggs, and honey does qualify as imposing, as you have to forcefully make an animal pregnant, forcefully take a child away, and forcefully take their lives away in the most horrifying manner. Being a non-vegan means you are imposing your way of life and your views on animals. So much for rational thinking, huh?
నిజానికి omega 3 fatty acids కావాలన్నా కూడా some kind of fish తినటము చాలా ముఖ్యం.
No, the human body does not need fish, it just needs a source of omega-3. You see, fish themselves don't create omega-3 fatty acids, it's made by plants. Smaller fish eat algae, which is a plant that produces a long-chain EPA and DHA omega-3 fatty acids. Now, we do have other plant sources of omega-3 on land, such as flax seeds, hemp seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. These foods contain the precursor to the long-chain fatty acids ALA, and our body converts this ALA into the long-chain fatty acids. Eating just 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed every day is enough to get all of your omega-3s. Not to mention, when you consume fish, there are high chances of you consuming high levels of toxins due to the law of biomagnification. Biomagnification refers to the accumulation of toxic substances in the food chain. The toxic chemicals that are naturally released into the aquatic environment by phytoplankton are absorbed by the lower organisms such as smaller fish. These chemicals are then transferred to different trophic levels when lower organisms are eaten by other organisms. That means that higher level predators such as bigger fish, birds, and marine mammals build up greater and more dangerous amounts of toxic materials than animals lower on the food chain. With us humans at the topmost of the food chain, we are exposed to the most number of toxins from so-called seafood. So leaving animal cruelty aside for a minute, fish is a horrible source of omega-3. So there is no need to support industries or individuals who head out at sea holding nets, hooks, and rods, who then capture innocent fish who can feel just as much pain and suffering as you and I can, to then suffocate them and bludgeon them to death for omega-3. We can all just take a tablespoon of flaxseed instead.
I want to come to the subject, and the subject is this. ఈ దేశంలో లేటెస్ట్ స్టాటిస్టిక్స్ ఏంటంటే 40% మంది పిల్లలు మాల్ న్యూట్రిషన్తో ఉన్నారు అండర్ 5. అలాగే 72% మంది ఇన్ఫెంట్స్ అంటే పసిబిడ్డలు, 52% మంది ఆడవారు ఎనీమియాతో బాధపడుతున్నారు. Let us remember this.
There are so many things wrong with a rational thinker here, and let's debunk them one by one. This might be a new word to many of you, and it's called as a red herring. A red herring is used during debates and arguments to distract the audience from the actual issue at hand, meaning that the person discussing has no other valid points to add to their argument, nor has the courage to admit that they are wrong. Babu Gogineni does this a lot when speaking about veganism. He never ever actually speaks about an animal or the suffering they go through, because if the victims are kept in the dark, no one can accuse you of doing any violence. Imagine if the topic of this debate was about planting trees and watering them. And instead of talking about that, Babu Gogineni started saying, there are so many people in our country who don't have water to drink. There are so many farmers who don't have enough water and end up committing suicide due to droughts. That is how nonsensical his diversion sounds. Basically, why decide whether you can be vegan or not based on whether impoverished people can afford vegan food or not? First of all, the cheapest foods in the market are vegan. And no, I am not talking about plant-based meat or dairy alternatives, which in fact you do not need to be a vegan. Grains, legumes, legumes and vegetables are all vegan, which is why impoverished people around the world consume predominantly a plant-based diet. The question to ask when talking about animal rights is not why 40% of the population is malnourished. The question to ask is whether yourself or any other non-vegan will be alright to being killed by this 40% of the population in order for them to meet their nutritional needs. I am sure in such a scenario, even though you are a viable source of meat, you would put your life ahead of the needs of those 40%. The animals who are currently being murdered and eaten by everyone also put their lives ahead of your nutritional needs or your taste buds, whether you like to hear that or not. Since both you and the animal do not want to be exploited by others for food, it clearly makes you a hypocrite for treating the animals differently. Firstly, if you understand that murdering and exploiting animals is fundamentally wrong, then you need to help create a world where even the 40% will no longer be malnourished through vegan food. But instead, it's as if you're using these malnourished people as an excuse, as a scapegoat to continue consuming flesh, dairy, eggs, and honey in your own life. For all the people who are currently impoverished, we need to ask them to check their options. Do they have other options for food and livelihood? We live in a globalized world where almost everyone has access to mobile phones, vehicles, and modern clothing. If there is an option available for a human to choose a plant food or choose a job that does not involve exploiting animals, then it only makes sense for them to choose that vegan option. Also, vegans never targeted impoverished people specifically with their message. We are targeting literally everyone on earth. But again, you want to misrepresent us and misdirect the conversation by speaking only about impoverished people when it comes to veganism. You don't base the current food you eat, the clothes you wear, the vehicle you drive, the house you live in, or anything based on whether impoverished people can afford those options or not. You do so only when it comes to veganism because you are a hypocrite who cannot give up their taste for animal flesh, dairy, eggs, and honey. All of us who can make a difference by being vegan, it is our moral obligation to do so. By us changing, we are directly contributing to a change in the product line of vegan options. And no, I don't mean meat alternatives or dairy alternatives, but rather whole foods like grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetables, which will then be plentiful and more available for all. Instead of using people who do not have a choice as an excuse to continue being a non-vegan, let us instead use our privilege to create a society where even impoverished people get vegan options and jobs that do not involve the exploitation of animals. So yes, we can change the world, but that change starts with you. So the question is, are you willing to change?
134 కోట్ల మంది ఉన్న దేశంలో 134 కోట్ల మంది ఉన్న దేశంలో దాంట్లో ఒక 50 కంటే తక్కువ పర్సెంటేజ్ ఉన్న ఆడవారు, వాళ్ళల్లో 52% మంది తల్లులు ఎనీమియాతో బాధపడుతున్నారు. మనం మాట్లాడుతున్నదంతా కూడా తిండి పుష్కలంగా లభించి కొవ్వు ఎక్కిన వాళ్ళ గురించి మాట్లాడుతున్నాం. ఈ కొవ్వు ఎక్కిన వాళ్ళ గురించి మాట్లాడే ముందు అసలు దేశం ఎలా ఉంది అన్నది మనం చూసుకోవడం చాలా ముఖ్యం. ఎందుకంటే ఐ వాంట్ టు రెఫర్ టు హర్షిక గారి కామెంట్స్. They're very damaging to the national health.
What does animal rights have to do with pregnant women being anemic? Also, if that really is the issue, then does he mean that everyone who is not an anemic pregnant mother has to be vegan? Why can we not speak about veganism in India when there are millions of people around India who can go vegan right now? It's not that impoverished people cannot afford vegan food, it's that they cannot afford food in itself. Also, Mr. Babu is either not aware or is completely ignoring another topic. Meat consumption is one of the major reasons why people in our country and the world over are malnourished and cannot get enough food. You see, the animals that are raised for their flesh, eggs, and dairy also have to eat. In fact, only if you give them a certain kind of feed will they grow to a certain size and can then be sold for a profit at the market. These animals are not only fed grass, hay, and other parts of the plant that humans cannot eat, but rather they are also fed channa, corn, soy, seeds, and leafy greens. You spoke about malnourishment and anemia, right? Soy is very high in protein, but we are feeding it to the animals you eat instead of feeding it to malnourished humans. Corn is very high in carbohydrates, but we are feeding it to the animals that you eat instead of feeding it to malnourished humans. Leafy greens are high in iron and can cure anemia, but hey, we are feeding it to the animals that you eat instead of feeding it to anemic, malnourished mothers. It takes on average 16 kilograms of plant food to produce just 1 kilogram of flesh. So please don't talk about malnourished people and how they cannot get enough nutrients when you choose to consume meat, dairy, and eggs. You eating meat is the equivalent of slapping malnourished people in the face.
ఏమిటి అని అంటే ఫుడ్లో వైలెన్స్ ఉందని, ఫుడ్లో ఎథిక్స్ రావాలని మాట్లాడటం మొదలుపెట్టినప్పుడు,
అంటే ఈ యూనివర్స్ అనేది కేవలం మన కోసమే కాదు, అన్ని సకల జీవ జంతువుల కోసం అనేది.
అవును, కానీ నేనున్నది కూడా బతకటానికే. నేను ఇంకోళ్ళ కోసం సావటానికి పుట్ల. నేను అట్లాగే దోమల్ని చంపుతాను, నేను యాంటీబయాటిక్స్ వాడి బ్యాక్టీరియాని చంపేస్తాను. సో నేను అంత మంచోడు నేను కాదు. మనిషి మనుగడ కోసమే నేనున్నది, నేను తినేది, నేను వాడే మందులు.
In society, we have rules. We also put forward new ideas to improve society and take our morals and ethics forward. People who were racist in the past and owned slaves used to make the statement, I am here to survive and not for anything else. Basically, racist, sexist, homophobic and other bigoted people care only about themselves while harming others. And they harm others not for their survival, but rather just for their benefit. When you say that you will not become a vegan because you're only here for your survival, that in no way justifies your actions of murdering and exploiting animals. It only shows that you're a speciesist bigot. We have seen that Mr. Babu Gogineni uses the tactic of never actually confronting the topic, that is in this case animal rights, when speaking against the ideological concepts of veganism. However, for the first time he's actually mentioned an animal here, but it's a mosquito. He also mentions other organisms such as bacteria that die when he takes antibiotics. Living beings can be classified into 5 kingdoms: animal, plant, fungi, protist, and monera. Veganism is about animal rights. Bacteria don't even belong to the animal kingdom. Why is this man always speaking about things that are off topic? Also, you are sick because bacteria attack you. Mosquitoes bite and drink your blood. They spread deadly diseases. When someone harms you, you have the right to defend yourself. This is called as self-defense. But has a chicken ever harmed you or anyone? Have you ever been attacked by a cow or a pig or a sheep? Even if they did harm us, do you think we could blame them? We breed them, bring them into this world and torture them and then kill them. We are the parasites in this scenario. Comparing the farm animals that we exploit and murder to mosquitoes and bacteria is a fallacy of false equivalence.
Diet is a fad. Diet is also something that can be advised by a doctor.
Again, it seems like we need to reiterate ourselves 1,000 times because Mr. Babu just wants to keep misrepresenting us. Although veganism involves food, it is neither a diet nor is it a fad. Veganism encompasses all avenues where animals have been exploited and commodified into products. This includes food, clothing, entertainment, culture, pets, zoos, circuses, animal research labs, everything. Veganism is a moral philosophy, it's not just a diet. As for calling it a fad, would you also call Jains who follow the principles of ahimsa and are vegetarian and also do not wear leather, wool and silk also as a fad? If not them, then why us? Because we have only taken that same philosophy to the logical conclusion. Fad is used to describe something that suddenly surges to popularity and then just dies down. Fidget spinners were a fad. The ice bucket challenge, that was a fad. Throwing Mentos inside a Coke bottle and then shaking it, that was also a fad. Veganism is not a fad, and in fact it's growing so rapidly all over the world. Over 6% of the population of Israel is vegan. So many dairy farms the world over are now shutting down due to the high demand of plant-based milks. Even one of the biggest and most egregious animal murderers on the planet, KFC, recognizes us and is now giving out vegan options with massive advertising. You can belittle the suffering and plight of the animals all you want by calling the one movement that stands up for them as a fad, but hey, you're wrong.
Diet is also something that can be advised by a doctor.
You do not consult a doctor when you want to change your diet, you consult a nutritionist. Doctors are not trained in nutrition in the current medical system, but nutritionists are. So if you want to consult one, please be my guest. We vegans never asked you not to. But the bottom line is this: a diet comprising of grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, supplemental B12 and adequate sunshine exposure will give you all the nutrients that your body needs.
In the evolution of the human brain, it is a consumption of meat that has given us the abilities that our brain has now. It's definitely linked to the consumption of easily available protein that comes to us through meat.
మనం మీట్ తీసుకున్న కారణంగా, మాంసం తిన్న కారణంగా మన జీర్ణాశయం చిన్నదవ్వటం, తద్వారా మిగిలిన ఎనర్జీ అంతా కూడా బ్రెయిన్కి వెళ్ళటం, మనిషి యొక్క పరిణామ క్రమంలో మనం ఇక్కడ కూర్చుని ఇట్లా మాట్లాడుకుంటున్నామంటే ఎప్పుడో మన ముత్తాత మాంసం తిన్నాడు కాబట్టి. అట్లా చేసిన కారణంగా మనకి శక్తి బ్రెయిన్ వైపుకి వెళ్ళింది కాబట్టి ద బ్రెయిన్ డెవలప్డ్, కళ్ళు ముందుకు వచ్చినాయి, బ్రెయిన్ డెవలప్ అయింది కాబట్టి ఈ అపోజబుల్ ఫింగర్స్ వచ్చి థంబ్ వచ్చింది కాబట్టి పనిముట్లు చేయటం, ఆలోచన చేయటము, మనకి గ్రాస్పింగ్ పవర్ రావటము ఇదంతా జరిగింది.
The human brain did not grow bigger because humans ate meat. There is no direct correlation between meat consumption and brain growth. If that were the case, then why aren't the other animals who eat far more meat than us smarter than us? The human brain has two primary sources of fuel, namely glucose, that is carbohydrates, and ketones, that is fats. Protein is not even a part of the equation here. Although anthropologists can only hypothesize as to how we grew larger brains, we can take a few key points from those hypotheses. We know that the brain consumes around 20% of all the energy consumed in a day, which is higher than any other organ of the human body. Ever since early humans started using fire to cook their food, the amount of energy the body expends in order to digest the food has been greatly reduced. This energy could therefore be used by other organs that demanded greater use during that time for our survival, that is, our brain. Also, humans began cooking starches after discovering how to use fire. Starches means underground tubers such as potatoes and sweet potatoes, which contain a great amount of carbohydrates. This in turn provided the brain with even more glucose, which is the brain's primary and preferred source of fuel. And thus it is more plausible to say that cooking our food and the consumption of high starchy foods such as potatoes and sweet potatoes aided in the development of our brain over just the consumption of meat. Also at this point, he is just blabbering nonsense. Every single primate on earth possesses opposable thumbs and eyes that face forward. Again, this has nothing to do with meat eating. He is just spouting utter nonsense.
ఈ డిస్కషను బయాలజీని వదిలేసి చేస్తే కుదరదండి. బయాలజికలీ వీఆర్ యానిమల్స్.
Biologically, we are animals. Wow, I never knew that before. So if you admit that we are biologically animals, then why is it wrong to call it violence when we kill someone who is biologically similar to us? It's almost as if you're not a rationalist and you are inconsistent with your own points.
ఎప్పుడన్నా ఒక పులి మంచిది, ఇది వెజిటేరియన్ పులి అంటామా? అనం. ఈ సింహం చాలా మంచిది, ఇది కులపరంగా ఫలానా ఫుడ్ తింటుందని అంటామా? లేదు. Cycle of life, cycle of nature, the way you ingest energy and you expend it, how physiology works, వాటిని డివోర్స్ చేసేసి మాట్లాడితే అందంగా చాలా మాట్లాడుకోవచ్చు, కానీ ఆకలేస్తుంది, తర్వాత జబ్బు.
Lions and tigers are obligate carnivores, meaning that they will not survive if they do not hunt and eat other animals. We can neither place our ethics on them nor can we base our ethics from them. That would be an appeal to nature fallacy. You should be knowing this. Just because something is natural does not mean that it is ethical. Did you know that if one lion killed the dominant male of another pride, he would then make that pride his own by killing off every offspring of that dominant male? Imagine if someone went to their neighbor's house and attempted to kill their neighbor's children because a lion would do so. Does that line of thinking not sound illogical and nonsensical to you? Well, your justification for murdering and eating animals by comparing ourselves to lions is just as illogical and nonsensical.
అండ్ వాటికి ఆల్టర్నేట్స్ కూడా ఉన్నాయి అని చెప్పేదే వెగనిజం కదా. వాటిలాగే బతకనిద్దాము, ఆల్టర్నేట్స్ ఉన్నాయి, లెట్స్ యూజ్ దెమ్ అనేది వీళ్ళు చెప్తున్నారు.
ఐఎమ్ టెల్లింగ్ యూ అండి, బ్రీదింగ్ ఈజ్ వైలెన్స్. ఏదైనా ప్రాణం పోతుంది అంటే ఇప్పుడు మైక్రోబ్స్ డై. బ్రీదింగ్ ఈజ్ వైలెన్స్.
Breathing is violence. Breathing is violence.
I want to refer to Harshita Gari comments in Harshita Gari comments. They're very damaging to the national health. ఏమిటి అని అంటే ఫుడ్లో వైలెన్స్ ఉందని, ఫుడ్లో ఎథిక్స్ రావాలని మాట్లాడటం మొదలు పెట్టినారు.
We started this morning's discussion with the idea of taboos about food. There's no reason why we should have taboos about food.
That's right, folks. Breathing is violence, but there is no violence in food because 40% of the population of India is malnourished. But apparently that 40% does not breathe. Therefore, breathing is violence. Amazing, sir. Standing ovation to you.
ప్లాంట్స్ ఏంటి బతికించు తింటున్నామా మనం మొక్కని? మొక్క తిన్నప్పుడు మొక్క చచ్చిపోటలా? మీరు పాలకూరతో వంట వండుకుంటే ఏం మిగులుతుంది అక్కడ? మీరు క్యాబేజ్ తెచ్చుకుని వండితే ఏం మిగులుతుంది తర్వాత? ఏమీ లేదు. మీరు మామిడి పండు తింటే మామిడి చెట్టు అట్టాగే ఉంటుంది. మామిడి పండ్లతోనే బతుకుతారా? అట్లాంటి డైట్లు కూడా ఉన్నాయండి. మళ్ళీ క్యాబేజ్ డైట్ అని, క్యాబేజ్ సూప్ డైట్ అని రకరకాలు ఉన్నాయి.
I'm not even going to debunk this at this point. It's only going to waste my time. The topic is about the murder and exploitation of cows, chickens, pigs, fish, goats, ducks and sheep. And instead this guy is sitting here and talking about mosquitoes, lions, tigers, mango, spinach, cabbage and bacteria. Not a single word about the animals that he pays to be killed. Brilliant, sir.
మనిషి మాంసాహారినా కాదా అని అనుమానం వచ్చిన ప్రతి ఒక్కళ్ళు ఒకసారి అద్దంలో ముఖం చూసుకుంటే నోరు తెరిస్తే ఆ పళ్ళు చెప్తాయి మీకు మీరు ఏం తింటున్నారు, మీ ఏం తినడానికి ఇది వచ్చింది అని. జీర్ణాశయం గురించి ఆలోచిస్తే అది కూడా తెలుసు.
Okay, let's do some actual research here. On one side you have a human mouth and on the other side you have a carnivore's mouth. Now if you look at these two and you think they are the same, you seriously need to get your eyes checked. In a carnivore, all the teeth are pointy and sharp and they're used for tearing and ripping flesh. They do not have any flat teeth that we humans possess. A carnivore can only open its jaw up and down. It can only rip and swallow flesh. The human lower jaw, like other herbivores, can actually move from side to side and therefore we can chew and grind our food. Carnivores actually use their sharp teeth and their claws to bite and kill their prey. Our digestive system has similarities with other primates, not carnivores. Our taste buds can taste sweetness, whereas a carnivore cannot taste anything sweet because meat does not contain any carbohydrates. We are basically a carbohydrate-seeking animal that happens to also be omnivorous. However, we are not dependent upon meat, dairy and eggs for our survival or for our nutritional requirements. We can get all of our nutrition from plant sources. All in all, this was a very disappointing video to make. Babu Gogineni has a huge following in Andhra and Telangana. He claims to be rational and scientific, but when it comes to veganism, he just never speaks about the actual topic and he is anything but scientific. Thank you so much for watching this video till the very end. See you guys next time.
Breathing is violence.